I need to tell you about a Friday evening in October, about a round table near the back of a Charlotte steakhouse, and about the moment my wife leaned close and pointed me toward a chair that said, more clearly than any words could, exactly what I had been worth to her for the past 9 years. What happened in the 4 days that followed changed everything I thought I understood about the word family. But before we get there, drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from today. I read every single one. My name is Silas. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years as an electrical engineer for Duke Energy, and I retired to a house I had been building equity in long before I ever met my wife Corinne. I am not a dramatic man. I don't raise my voice easily. I prefer a slow morning with good coffee to almost any other form of entertainment. I met Corinne at a grief support group at Greater Covenant Baptist 8 months after I lost my first wife to ovarian cancer. Corinne had recently finalized her divorce from a man named Winston who had been, as she described him, present in theory and absent in practice. They had one son together, a young man named Wesley, who was 24 at the time we met. Broad-shouldered, quiet in crowds, but sharp when you got him talking about commercial real estate, which was his field and his passion. Corinne and I dated 2 years before I proposed, down on one knee in the kitchen of my house on Ridgeback Court in Concord, North Carolina. I want you to remember that house, because it matters to everything that comes later. I bought it in 2004. My name on the deed, my down payment, my 30-year mortgage I had been paying down for nearly a decade before Corinne ever set her keys on the counter beside the stove. She never asked to add her name to it. I took that as an understanding between adults. My older brother had given me one piece of financial advice before our father died. Keep your name on what you built. Love doesn't need a cosigner to prove itself. What I also want you to understand is Wesley. I chose him. That is the only accurate word for it. When Corinne and I married, Wesley was 25, old enough that no one expected me to do a thing except show up at holidays and be polite. But that is not how I was built. He was finishing his master's degree in Charlotte when we got married. He had a used Honda Accord that burned oil and needed new tires. I drove it to the shop on a Saturday without mentioning it to anyone and paid $1,100 and handed him back the keys. You'll run better now, I told him. He nodded. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. Over the next 9 years, the list of things I did for Wesley got longer and I kept no running tab, because that is not what fathers do. Even the ones nobody officially asks to be fathers. I co-signed his first apartment lease in Charlotte's South End when his rental history was too thin to qualify a loan. I covered 2 months of car insurance when he was between jobs in 2019. When he launched his own real estate consulting business and needed professional office space in Noda, I covered 6 months of rent, $1,300 a month, while he built his client base. He paid some of it back. I never asked about the rest. Then Wesley met Leah. She was from Greensboro, a physical therapist, careful and kind and steady in a way I recognized and respected the first time I met her over dinner at a Mexican restaurant in Uptown. They got engaged in the spring, and the wedding was set for early November at a venue in Ballantyne. A restored farmhouse property in the southern part of Charlotte, the kind of place with string lights and old oak floors that photographs like a painting. I offered to help with the costs. That is what I do. Corinne and Leah sat at my kitchen table with a spreadsheet and a binder full of vendor quotes. I looked at the numbers, and I said I would cover the venue deposit and the full catering contract. I did not say this to be thanked. I said it because a man who has watched a boy grow into someone worth rooting for wants to do something real at a moment like this. $23,000 spread across 2 vendors. Both contracts listed me as the primary financial guarantor. The remaining balances on each were due 14 days before the event. I carried real pride into October. The uncomplicated kind. Wesley had turned something around. He had built a career, was marrying a woman worth his time, and I had been part of that foundation in some quiet and unmistakable way. I did not need a toast. I just wanted to sit up front and watch him start his life right. The rehearsal dinner was the Friday before the wedding, a private room at a steakhouse in uptown Charlotte. 26 guests, family, and the wedding party. I wore my charcoal blazer and the burgundy tie Corinne had given me for my birthday 2 years ago. She said it made me look distinguished. I believed her because I wanted to. I arrived early to check on the room setup. I had called ahead about the lighting. It is the kind of thing I do without being asked. That is when I heard it. I was near the coat rack in the hallway, adjusting my collar in the mirror, when I caught Corinne's voice around the corner, low and compressed, the way she speaks when she doesn't want to be heard. He came all the way from Colombia. Leah, just let Wesley handle the seating. It'll mean the world to him. A pause, then quieter. Silas will understand. He's always understanding. Winston needs to be at that table. He's Wesley's father. I stood without moving. The restaurant noise filled in around her words, ice dropping into glasses somewhere, a door swinging open and shut. Winston. I had met the man twice in 9 years. Once at a birthday dinner for Corinne's younger sister, where he'd arrived late and left before the cake. Once at a neighborhood cookout where he spent most of his time checking his phone. He had not been at Wesley's college graduation. He had not come to the engagement dinner. He had not, to my knowledge, paid child support in any consistent way during Wesley's childhood, a fact Corinne had shared with me herself in the early months of our relationship, quietly, as though it embarrassed her. I dried my hands on a paper towel I hadn't realized I was holding. I walked back into the main hallway. I waited. Corinne came around the corner, smiling. "Room looks beautiful," she said. "It does," I said. I didn't mention the phone call. I wanted to see how far she would carry it. Dinner was warm and full of the sound of people who were genuinely glad to be in the same room. Wesley stood and thanked everyone for coming. He mentioned his mother. He mentioned Leah's parents. He raised his glass and looked around that private room. He did not say my name. I told myself it was the pace of the moment, the words moving too fast to catch every thread. Then Corinne touched my arm. "Baby," she said, keeping her voice just below the table noise. "I want to ask you something and I need you to understand." She smiled. That wide, warm smile I had fallen for at a church grief group 8 years ago. "Winston is here. He drove up from Colombia this afternoon. Wesley really wants him at the main table tonight. The big round one up front." She glanced toward it. "Could you maybe sit with the Hendersons and the Garfields over by the window? I think you'd actually have a better time over there." She said it the way you ask someone to move a coat off a chair. Easy, already decided. The Hendersons were our neighbors on Ridgeback Court. The Garfields were friends from church. Good people, but they had not spent 9 years writing checks and co-signing leases and paying for 6 months of office rent while a young man figured out who he was. I looked past Corinne's shoulder. Winston was already seated at the front table, leaning back in his chair in a leather jacket that was too warm for October, laughing at something Leah's brother had said. Easy, expansive, the posture of a man welcoming people into his own home. "Of course," I said. I picked up my glass and walked to the window table. I made conversation with the Hendersons. I ate a very good steak. I watched from 5 tables back as Wesley caught Winston's eye across the room and smiled the way grown men smile when they've been carrying an old want for a long time and someone finally hands it back to them. I did not feel rage during dinner. I felt something quieter than rage. Something that had been accumulating for years and had simply stopped pretending it wasn't there. Corinne talked the entire drive home about how meaningful it was that Winston had made the trip. How much it was going to mean to Wesley to have his father there. I said very little. The highway lights swept through the windshield one after another. She didn't seem to notice my silence. She didn't seem to notice much about me that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, turning its slow circles. I thought about the signed contracts in my filing cabinet in the spare room. Venue, remaining balance, $11,400. Catering remaining balance, $9,800. My name on both. My money committed but not yet delivered. I thought about the home improvement loan Wesley and Leah had applied for at the credit union. $40,000 to renovate the kitchen in the house they'd just bought. They had asked me 2 months ago to co-sign. The application was still processing. Nothing had closed. I got up at 5:30 in the morning and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table by the window. My table. My chair. The one I had pulled out and pushed in at the end of every meal for 14 years, in a house where no one had ever once asked me to sit somewhere else. By 7 o'clock, I had made 3 phone calls. The first was to the venue coordinator, a woman named Ms. Perkins, who answered on the second ring, even on a Saturday morning, because people who coordinate weddings don't take weekends off 4 weeks out from an event. I told her I needed to withdraw as financial guarantor on the contract. She was quiet for a moment, then professional. She said the remaining balance would need a new guarantor within 10 days, or the booking would be in jeopardy. I told her I understood and asked her to communicate that directly to the couple. She said she would. The second call was to the catering manager. Same conversation, same outcome. He was less patient than Miss Perkins, but managed his surprise with reasonable grace. The third call was to the loan officer at the credit union handling Wesley's home improvement application. I explained I was withdrawing as co-signer. She noted it in the file. I thanked her and hung up. I rinsed my mug. I set it upside down on the drying rack. I went for my morning walk around the neighborhood, past the Henderson's house, past the Paulson place with the overgrown crepe myrtles, and when I came back, I sat on the front porch and let the Saturday morning come in on its own schedule. The calls started at 11. Leah called first. Her voice was measured, but something beneath it was shaking. Silas, the venue called. There's an issue with the contract. Do you know what's happening? I withdrew as financial guarantor, I said. They'll need to find someone to take my place. A pause. Can we talk about this? Did something happen? I'm fine, I said. I just decided I was no longer the right person to hold that commitment. Wesley called 20 minutes later. His voice had an edge to it. Silas, what is going on? The caterer just called Leah's mother. I withdrew my name from the contracts, I said. The events are still on the books with both vendors. The balance is no longer my obligation. Silas. He said my name the way people say it when they're trying to open a door without a key. We have a wedding in 4 weeks. I know the date, I said. I've known it since April. Is this because of last night? Because my mom moved the seating around? Last night was just last night, I said. Call Ms. Perkins at the venue. She'll walk you through your options. I hung up and sat with the quiet. Corinne came through the side door at 2 in the afternoon, home from a hair appointment, and I could tell from the way she set her purse down that she already knew. She stood in the kitchen doorway looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face before. Not anger exactly. Something more complicated than anger. Silas, she said, what did you do? I removed my name from some financial commitments, I said. My name, my money, my decision. His wedding. Your son's wedding, I said, not unkindly, just with precision. His father is Winston. I heard you say so last night. Something moved across her face. That is not what I meant by that. You meant it enough to seat me at the neighbor table, I said. You meant it enough to give Winston the chair that should have been mine. She started then, her voice lifting. About how I was overreacting, about how important it was to Wesley to feel Winston's presence, about how this wasn't a statement about me, about how she needed me to be the bigger person here. I let the words come. I waited until they slowed. I have been the bigger person for 9 years, I said. I was the bigger person when I paid $1,100 to fix his car without being asked. When I co-signed his lease so he'd have a decent place to live. When I covered 6 months of his office rent while he built something for himself. When I put $23,000 in vendors' hands for a wedding that Winston has not contributed $1 single toward. I looked at her. Moving me to the back table wasn't about seating arrangements, Corinne. It was about what you believe to be true. And you handed that truth to a man who never earned it. She didn't answer, not in any way that reached me. The week that followed was a particular kind of quiet. The kind that has actual weight to it, that settles in corners and doesn't move. Corinne worked her phone trying to salvage the vendor situation. Wesley and Leah scrambled to find a new guarantor. Winston, I was told through second-hand channels, had offered to step in financially. He sent $1,200 for a wedding contracted at nearly $40,000 all in. The wedding was postponed, rescheduled for late spring at a smaller venue, reduced headcount, different caterer. I was not involved in any of that planning. I filed for divorce 11 days after the rehearsal dinner. A Charlotte attorney walked me through the property situation in plain language. The house on Ridgeback Court was premarital, held solely in my name, purchased before the marriage with my down payment and my ongoing mortgage payments. North Carolina law on premarital property is straightforward. The house was mine before Corinne. It remained mine. She had 30 days to find other housing. She went to stay with her sister in Gastonia. She left on a Tuesday. I carried 2 of her boxes to her car. She didn't say anything when she got in. I didn't expect her to. There is a barber shop on Cabarrus Avenue in Concord that I have been going to since 1998. A man named Percy cuts my hair. Percy is 71 years old, served 20 years in the Navy, and has an opinion about everything he will share with you whether you asked for it or not. When I sat in his chair on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after all of this, and told him the short version, he listened all the way through without interrupting, which is not his usual habit. He set down his scissors and looked at me in the mirror. "You know what your real problem was?" he said. "Tell me." "You were so focused on being the man nobody asked you to be that you didn't notice they'd already cast someone else in the role." I sat with that. "You did everything right," he said, picking up his scissors again, "and they thanked you for it by treating it like wallpaper. That's not on you. But staying after you saw what you saw, that would have been." The barber shop smelled the way it always does. Warm clippers. The cedar spray he uses on the leather chairs. The faint ghost of someone's aftershave from an hour before. "What do you do now?" I asked. "What you've always done," Percy said. "Just for yourself this time." Wesley called me in January, 3 months after the rehearsal dinner. He didn't lead with an apology. He asked if I would be willing to meet. I said I was. We sat in a booth at a diner on Concord Mills Boulevard, a cold Tuesday morning, coffee in heavy ceramic cups. He looked tired, the particular kind of tired that comes from learning something you should have been taught earlier. He told me Winston had gone quiet after the postponement, hadn't returned calls, had sent a second check for $600 and then stopped responding altogether. I didn't say anything. "Leah asked me what you actually paid for over the years," he said. I told her what I knew. She said she hadn't understood the full picture. He looked at his cup. I hadn't either, honestly. My mom handled the finances. I didn't always know where the money was coming from. "I know that," I said. "I should have said something at the rehearsal dinner, when she moved you to the other table." He didn't look up. "I saw it happen. I didn't do anything." "No," I said, "you didn't." "I'm sorry for that." I sat with it. The apology landed somewhere real, below the breastbone, in the place where old hurts tend to settle and wait. I didn't rush past it. I'm not going to tell you we pick up where we left off, I said. That wouldn't be honest, but I can tell you that I don't regret a single thing I did for you over those 9 years. Not one check, not one signature. I did those things because I chose to. Nobody made me. I know that, he said. I just needed you to know that I knew it too. We sat another 40 minutes, talked about his business, about Leah, about the spring wedding plans. He asked if I would come. I told him I'd think about it. He nodded like that was fair. On the sidewalk outside, he shook my hand and then pulled me into the kind of brief, slightly awkward embrace that men give when they can't quite find the words for what they actually mean. I drove home along the interstate with the Piedmont winter wide and gray around me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, something cleaner. Clearness. The way a window feels after rain. These days I drink my coffee on the back porch of a house that is, and has always been mine. The mornings are still. There is a cardinal that comes to the cedar feeder I rebuilt from scrap wood last spring. He doesn't stay long. He takes what he needs and goes, and I have come to appreciate that about him. I picked up woodworking again, something I hadn't done since my first wife was alive. I built a bookshelf last fall, a set of garage shelves after that. Percy asked if I could make him a display case for his Navy medals, which currently live in a shoebox under his workbench. I told him I'd get to it. I will. I think sometimes about what it cost me to spend 9 years making myself essential to people who had quietly decided I was a resource rather than a person. I don't think about it with bitterness. I think about it the way you think about a road that was longer than it needed to be. It still got you somewhere, even if it wasn't where you planned. Here is what I understand now at 63 that I didn't fully believe at 54. Gratitude is not guaranteed by sacrifice. Respect is not automatic because you wrote the check. And when someone shows you the seat they've actually assigned you, not the one they keep promising is coming, believe the seat. I showed up for 9 years and I gave everything I had. But what I gave was mine to give, and when I stopped giving it, it was also mine to take back. That is not cruelty. That is clarity. And some days clarity is the most honest thing you can offer, even to yourself. If you've ever been the one holding the roof up while someone else stood in the doorway calling it their house, I hope this reaches you today. Walking away from something that was never truly meant for you is not failure. It is not weakness. It is, finally, the truth. Thank you for spending this time with me. Share your story in the comments. I mean that. And if this found someone who needed to hear it, pass it along to them. Subscribe to Voices of Uncle Henry, and I'll see you next time.